There's a very interesting new report that has come out of the House Antitrust Committee. This is the committee that oversees cartels and monopolies and is in charge of oversight of the antitrust laws. And the report is a bipartisan report. You've got Democrats and Republicans signing on. So here's an interesting case where the Democrats' traditional kind of hatred of large, giant corporations combines with the right's newfound and I think legitimate suspicion of corporate power. And this report focuses on Amazon, on Apple, Facebook, and Google. And the question it raises, and it really answers the question, are these virtual monopolies? And the answer is yes. Now, what that means, and I think it's very significant, by the way, these very corporations which have built up a lot of influence in Washington lobbied aggressively to block this report, to water it down, to defeat it. But it nevertheless has made its way out, and it's going to be the foundation now for antitrust laws that could conceivably break up Apple, break up Amazon, break up Facebook, break up Google. By the way, this would be fantastic. And by the way, when I say fantastic, it would be consistent also with free market principles. When you think of free market, some people think of free markets as the government sort of does nothing and essentially laissez-faire, let them do whatever you want. But no. Markets depend upon enforcing contracts, and you need courts to do that. Markets depend upon legitimate accounting practices, and you need to have those in place so that, for example, someone thinking of investing or buying into a corporation can find out what the books of that corporation look like. Obviously, there are other laws affecting pollution and so on, but one of the key principles of free markets is competition. And competition does not exist when you have corporations that are so big that they can provide what are called barriers to entry. Barriers to entry are essentially roadblocks that mean that new people who want to do this, let's say somebody wants to start a search engine. What happens now? Google blocks you. They'll try to buy you out. They try to cajole you. They try to shut you down. They try to intimidate you. They try to tell your potential customers not to do business with you, or Google won't do business with them. And it's like this with all these other players too. The report goes into a lot of really fascinating detail to show, for example, how Amazon allows competitors, people selling, for example, if you want to sell books, and you can go sell books on Amazon, even though Amazon is a bookstore. But if you go try to sell books on Amazon, they will essentially steal all your data so that they now know who your customers are. They can then sell their products to your customers, but do it by undercutting your prices. And not only can they do it, but they do it. They are doing it even now. So they're leveraging their monopoly power essentially to wreck the competition. Now, just being a big corporation doesn't by itself make you a monopoly. Let's say you're a big corporation because you have better products that you sell at better prices and you have really better marketing. And so you're beating the competition. Anybody else is welcome to come in and compete with you, and you just happen to do the job best. That is not a monopoly. What a monopoly is a agglomeration of power in a particular field where you're shutting down the competition, or where you're combining. Think, for example, here of Apple and its apps, where Apple is basically able to shut down competitive apps by saying, in effect, that if you want to deal with Apple and do business with Apple, you have to use the Apple app. And if you use the Apple app, you have to pay with Apple's independently acquired payment system. And if you want to use other types of payment system, Apple will try to thwart you or try to block you. Similarly, think of the combination of, say, Google and YouTube. Google owns YouTube. And so, for example, if you have videos on Rumble, Google can suppress them in Google searches. Why? Because Rumble is competing with something that Google owns, which is YouTube. Now, this is the classic definition of using monopoly power to try to shut down competition. And I think that there is an interesting, by the way, We've talked about censorship and free speech. What I'm talking about now has nothing directly to do with that. But it would benefit free speech because if you break up these corporations, then you begin to have competition, you begin to have a more varied marketplace, and with a more varied marketplace, you get a greater variety and a greater diversity of ideas.